In the sprawling, sun-drenched metropolis of Miami, a city built on ambition and illusion, a new kind of kingpin was rising. He wasn't a drug lord commanding armies of street soldiers, nor a financial tycoon manipulating Wall Street. His kingdom was invisible, his weapon was a keyboard, and his empire was built on a currency of stolen data. His name was Albert Gonzalez. To the United States Secret Service, he was their most valuable informant, a brilliant hacker who had turned to the side of the law, helping them dismantle the very cybercriminal underworld he had helped create. But in the shadows of the web, under aliases like soupnazi, J4 Gagwar 17, and Segvec, he was a ghost in the machine, orchestrating the most audacious series of data heists the world had ever seen. This is the story of a double life, a tale of staggering genius and bottomless greed. It's the story of how one man and his elite crew of digital thieves brought corporate America to its knees, compromising the financial data of nearly 200 million people. They didn't use guns or getaway cars. They used SQL injections and packet sniffers. They moved millions, not in duffel bags, but through encrypted servers in Latvia and Ukraine. This is the definitive account of Operation Get Rich or Die Tryin', the epic cyber heist that redefined the frontiers of crime in the 21st century. It is the story of the Secret Service informant who stole 200 million credit cards. Every legend has an origin story. For Albert Gonzalez, it began not in a corporate boardroom or a clandestine meeting, but in a modest, working-class neighborhood in southwest Miami. Born in 1981 to Cuban immigrants, Albert was a product of his environment, bright, charismatic, and imbued with the restless energy of his city. From the outside, he was the model son, a shy but popular leader among his circle of computer-obsessed friends. His father ran a landscaping business, and Albert was known to help out, his hands as comfortable with soil and shovels as they were with a mouse and keyboard. But the digital world was his true calling. His obsession began at age 12 with the purchase of his first computer, a Packard Bell 486. It was a gateway to a universe without limits. Michael Sala, a journalist for the Miami Herald who extensively covered the case, noted the duality that defined Gonzalez early on. He was, Sala wrote, a nerdy kid, the leader of a pack of computer misfits. This pack wasn't just playing games. They were exploring, probing, and learning the architecture of the nascent Internet. Then, at age 14, came the hack that would set the course for his life. From his high school library, using the school's rudimentary computers, Albert Gonzalez breached the network of one of the most secure facilities on the planet, NASA. It was an act of audacious curiosity, a digital joyride. He later claimed he was just looking for evidence of aliens. While he didn't find any UFOs, he found something far more intoxicating, a sense of power. The FBI eventually traced the intrusion back to Miami and paid a visit to the Gonzalez household. No charges were filed. It was a warning, a slap on the wrist for a teenager who had gone too far. For any other kid, this terrifying brush with federal law enforcement would have been a life-altering wake-up call. For Albert, it was a validation. He had knocked on the door of the giants, and they had noticed. As he moved into his late teens, his activities migrated to the underground of the Internet. It was here, on Internet relay chat channels and clandestine forums, that he christened himself soupnazi, a nod to the famously belligerent Seinfeld character. It was a fitting moniker for a personality that was becoming increasingly assertive and dominant in the digital realm. He joined a hacking collective known as the Keebler Elves, a group notorious for website defacements. To them, hacking was a form of rebellion, a way to prove their superiority over corporate system administrators. Gonzalez told a journalist from ZDNet at the time, "Defacing a site to me is showing the admins and government that we own them." But this was more than teenage rebellion. It was an apprenticeship. With every system he cracked, every firewall he bypassed, he was honing his skills, learning the languages of digital infiltration, and building a reputation. He moved from Miami to Kearney, New Jersey, a quiet suburb that offered anonymity and proximity to the financial heart of the nation. It was in a nondescript garden apartment, surrounded by senior citizens, that the prodigy would evolve into a professional, setting the stage for a criminal enterprise beyond anyone's imagination. By the early 2000s, the digital underground was evolving. Hacking was no longer just about notoriety and bragging rights. It was about money. A new economy was being born in the dark corners of the web, centered on a practice known as carding, the trafficking of stolen credit card numbers. The problem for aspiring cybercriminals was fragmentation. Hackers who stole the data, vendors who created fake cards, and fraudsters who used them were all scattered across different forums and chat rooms. There was no central hub, no Amazon for identity thieves. Albert Gonzalez saw an opportunity. Along with a few trusted associates, he became a key administrator and mastermind behind a new website, ShadowCrew.com. Launched in 2002, ShadowCrew was a revolution in cybercrime. It was a professionally designed, user-friendly, all-in-one marketplace for financial fraud. It had user ratings, escrow services to ensure fair trades, and tutorials for beginners. It was a criminal enterprise run with the efficiency of a Silicon Valley startup. A press release from the Department of Justice, issued years later after the site was dismantled, detailed the breathtaking scope of its operations. ShadowCrew was a one-stop shop for identity theft, it read. Members could buy and sell stolen credit and debit card numbers, counterfeit passports, fake driver's licenses, fraudulent student IDs, and even bogus health insurance cards. One member famously auctioned off access to 18 million email accounts, complete with usernames and passwords. The site was a bustling bazaar of illicit data. Gonzalez, as soupnazi, was more than just an admin. He was a leader and a visionary. He enforced the rules, vetted new members, and ensured the platform ran smoothly. Under his guidance, ShadowCrew grew to over 4,000 members worldwide. It was a global syndicate, a testament to his organizational genius. The Secret Service, which had begun tracking the explosion in credit card fraud, dubbed their investigation into this network Operation Firewall. They estimated that ShadowCrew was responsible for at least $4.3 million in documented losses, though the real number was undoubtedly far, far higher. The platform was a complex ecosystem. Hackers, known as vendors, would post massive lists of stolen card numbers, called dumps. These dumps were categorized by the issuing bank, the card type, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and even the country of origin. Prices varied. A standard U.S. card might sell for $1 or $2, while a premium European card with a high credit limit could fetch up to $50. Other members, known as carders, would buy this data and encode it onto the magnetic stripes of blank plastic cards using special hardware, also available on the site. These cloned cards would then be used for shopping sprees, buying luxury goods, electronics, and gift cards that could easily be resold for cash. ShadowCrew was more than a marketplace. It was a community, a dark reflection of the legitimate tech world. They had their own slang, their own hierarchies, and a shared sense of being digital outlaws, smarter than the corporations they plundered and one step ahead of the law. And at the center of it all was Albert Gonzalez, the quiet kid from Miami, now a kingpin in a burgeoning digital mafia. He had built a machine that turned stolen data into untraceable cash, and it was running perfectly. But the bigger the empire, the more attention it attracts. The law was coming, and it was coming for him. In 2003, the machine sputtered. Albert Gonzalez made a mistake. He was careless during a cash withdrawal from an ATM in New Jersey using a fraudulent card. He was arrested by local police, and given the nature of the crime, the Secret Service was quickly brought in. They found him in possession of 15 counterfeit cards. For the agents of the New York field office, this wasn't just another carder. As they delved into his digital life, they realized they had captured a major player. They had found soupnazi. Facing years in federal prison, the 22-year-old Gonzalez was presented with a choice: become a number in the correctional system or use his extraordinary talents for the other side. He chose to cooperate. In one of the most ironic twists in the history of cybercrime, the co-founder of ShadowCrew became a confidential informant for the United States Secret Service. And he was brilliant at it. As an insider, Gonzalez provided the government with an unprecedented view into the heart of the digital underworld. He identified key players, explained their methods, and translated the complex code of the carding world for federal agents. His cooperation was the linchpin of Operation Firewall. Thanks to his intelligence, the Secret Service was able to systematically dismantle the very organization he had built. In October 2004, the trap was sprung. The government seized the ShadowCrew servers and, in a coordinated global sweep, arrested 28 members in the U.S. and 6 other countries. The Secret Service hailed it as a landmark victory in the war on cybercrime. In a public statement, they lauded the operation's success. Gonzalez was their star player, the secret weapon who had delivered the enemy's battle plans. He was paid a stipend of $75,000 a year for his work, a handsome reward for a young man who, to all appearances, had turned his life around. He moved back to Miami, ostensibly to continue his work as a trusted government asset. But Albert Gonzalez was living a lie. The cooperation was a charade, a strategic maneuver. Even as he was feeding information to his Secret Service handlers, he was secretly building a new crew, a more elite, more disciplined, and more ambitious team of hackers. He had seen the vulnerabilities of ShadowCrew. It was too open, too chaotic. His new operation would be different. It would be a surgical strike force. This betrayal was profound. He was on the government's payroll, a protected informant, and yet he was actively plotting the largest financial crimes in American history. He used his position to his advantage, learning about the government's investigative techniques, their strengths and their weaknesses. He knew what they were looking for because he was helping them look for it. It was the perfect cover. The poacher had not just become the gamekeeper. He was now hunting in the gamekeeper's own private reserve, using his uniform as a disguise. The stage was set for his masterpiece. Back in Miami, Freed from the threat of prison and flush with government cash, Gonzalez assembled his new team. It was a global, all-star crew of cybercriminals. There was Stephen Watt, a brilliant coder from New York who developed the sophisticated data-stealing software. Damon Patrick Toey, a seasoned fraudster who handled logistics, and a shadowy Ukrainian hacker known only as Hacker One, who provided access to secure servers. Together, they christened their new venture with a name that left no doubt about their intentions: Operation Get Rich or Die Tryin'. Their first major target was TJX Companies, the parent corporation of retail giants like TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and HomeGoods. It was a colossal target, with thousands of stores and millions of daily transactions. The attack began not with a sophisticated piece of code, but with a simple, almost primitive technique known as ward driving. In 2005, members of Gonzalez crew drove through the parking lots of retail stores in Miami with a laptop and a powerful antenna, literally sniffing the air for vulnerable Wi-Fi networks. They found one at a Marshalls store in Minnesota. The store was using an outdated and easily crackable encryption standard called WEP. It was the digital equivalent of leaving the back door wide open. Once inside that single store's network, they had a foothold. From there, they patiently and methodically worked their way up the corporate ladder, moving from the store's local system to the central payment processing servers in Framingham, Massachusetts, and Watford, United Kingdom. It was a masterclass in lateral movement within a corporate network. On those central servers, they installed a custom piece of malware, a packet sniffer designed by Stephen Watt. This program acted like a digital wiretap, silently intercepting and recording credit and debit card numbers as they were being transmitted, unencrypted, for processing. For 18 months, the sniffer did its work. A silent digital siphon, funneling a river of data out of TJX's servers to their own secure servers in Latvia and Ukraine. The scale was staggering. They stole the data of over 45 million cards. At the time, it was the largest data breach in history. And the money began to flow. Gonzalez and his crew had a sophisticated system for cashing out. The stolen numbers were sold in bulk on private servers to a network of buyers, primarily in Eastern Europe. These buyers would then encode the numbers onto physical cards and orchestrate mass withdrawals from ATMs around the world. The profits were laundered through a complex web of shell companies and foreign bank accounts before being funneled back to Gonzalez and his team in cash. The lifestyle this funded was explosive. Gonzalez, the once nerdy kid, transformed. He threw himself a lavish $75,000 birthday party. He bought a sky blue BMW M3 and rented luxury condos in Miami's most exclusive neighborhoods. He wore a Rolex and carried a Glock pistol. His once modest apartment became a party den, littered with cash, drugs, and high-end electronics. In one now infamous instant message conversation with a co-conspirator, he complained about the physical toll of his success. "I need to count 300K, too much work." He was literally buried in cash, the physical manifestation of his digital crimes. Journalist James Verini, writing for the New York Times Magazine, captured the intoxicating absurdity of Gonzalez's life during this period. He was living the life of a rock star, a new-age Gatsby, whose fortune was built on an invisible crime. He was flying high, seemingly untouchable. While the Secret Service lauded him as their informant, he was committing crimes on a scale they had never imagined. He had successfully gamed the system, playing both sides against the middle. And he was just getting started. The TJX heist was only a dress rehearsal for his magnum opus. Having conquered the retail sector, Gonzalez set his sights on a far more ambitious target. Why rob individual stores when you can rob the bank that serves them all? His new target was Heartland Payment Systems, a massive credit card payment processor based in New Jersey. Heartland was a critical node in the global financial system, handling transactions for over 250,000 businesses, from small-town diners to major retail chains. A breach here would be the equivalent of hitting the Fort Knox of financial data. The method of attack had to be more sophisticated than war driving. This time, they used a technique that would become their signature: the SQL injection. SQL, or Structured Query Language, is the language used to communicate with databases. An SQL injection attack exploits a vulnerability in a website's code, allowing an attacker to send malicious commands directly to the underlying database. In late 2007, Gonzalez's team found such a vulnerability on Heartland's corporate website. It was a tiny crack in a massive fortress, but it was all they needed. Through that crack, they injected their malicious code. This allowed them to plant a customized piece of malware deep inside Heartland's network, a network that processed over 100 million transactions a month. This new malware was a ghost, designed to evade the company's antivirus and intrusion detection systems. It was a patient predator. For months, it lay dormant, mapping the network, identifying the data streams, and waiting. Then, in early 2008, it activated. Just like in the TJX hack, the malware began to sniff and siphon off payment card data as it moved through Heartland's systems. But the scale was on a completely different level. This wasn't just one retail chain, it was tens of thousands of them. The program captured not only the card number, but the Track2 data from the magnetic stripe, which contains the cardholder's name and other details needed to clone a card perfectly. The final tally was apocalyptic. The Heartland breach resulted in the theft of over 130 million credit and debit card numbers. Combined with other breaches they conducted against companies like 7-Eleven and the Hannaford grocery chain, Gonzalez's crew had compromised nearly 200 million accounts. It was, and remains, one of the largest data breaches in human history. The sheer volume of stolen data was so immense they had trouble exfiltrating it without being detected. The international money laundering network went into overdrive. The logistics of converting 130 million card numbers into cash were immense. Gonzalez relied on partners in Ukraine, Russia, and other parts of the former Soviet Union. These syndicates employed teams of cashiers who would work in shifts hitting ATMs around the clock. The profits were staggering, estimated to be in the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Gonzalez's paranoia grew with his wealth. He became convinced the Secret Service was onto him. He was right. Across the country and around the world, financial institutions were detecting a tsunami of fraud. Visa and MasterCard's fraud detection departments began noticing patterns. Thousands of cards, all used at different merchants, were suddenly being used for fraudulent withdrawals. The one thing they all had in common was that at some point they had all been processed by Heartland Payment Systems. The net was closing in, but the investigators had no idea that the man they were hunting was already on their team.
The investigation that finally brought down Albert Gonzalez was as complex and multinational as his criminal enterprise. It wasn't one single thread, but a convergence of dozens of separate inquiries that slowly began to point toward one mastermind. The first major breakthrough came from an unlikely source: Turkish authorities. In 2008, they arrested a Ukrainian hacker named Maxim Yastremski one of the world's biggest vendors of stolen credit card data. When they analyzed his laptop, they found millions of card numbers and, more importantly, chat logs. These logs were a Rosetta Stone for the global carding scene. They contained conversations with a mysterious figure who went by the screen name Jaguar17. This figure was a major supplier, providing Yastrzemski with huge, high-quality dumps of data. The data from these dumps was eventually traced back to the TJX breach. Simultaneously, investigators in the U.S. were closing in from another angle. The Secret Service, investigating a breach at the Dave & Buster's restaurant chain, managed to track the digital breadcrumbs back to a server in Latvia. When they obtained a forensic image of that server's hard drive, they found a treasure trove of evidence: the hacking tools used in the attacks, more stolen data, and more chat logs. In those logs, they saw the same screen names: soupnazi, Segvec, and Jaguar17. The pieces were starting to connect. The TJX case, the Dave & Buster's case, the Heartland breach, they were all linked. But the identity of the kingpin remained a mystery. The final, shocking piece of the puzzle came from within the Secret Service itself. Agents working on the Dave & Buster's case were running the screen names from the Latvian server through their databases. When they ran Segvec, they got a hit. The name was associated with one of their own confidential informants, Albert Gonzalez. It was a moment of stunning disbelief. As one agent later recounted, the initial reaction was that it had to be a mistake. Gonzalez was their guy, their asset. He was helping them fight these very crimes. But the digital evidence was irrefutable. They cross-referenced the IP addresses from the chat logs with the logs from the secure network Gonzalez used to communicate with his Secret Service handlers. It was a perfect match. Their star informant wasn't just involved, he was the mastermind. The man they had been paying to help them solve the biggest data heists in history was the one committing them. On May 7, 2008, the double life of Albert Gonzalez came to an abrupt end. A team of Secret Service agents descended on room 1508 of the luxurious National Hotel in Miami Beach where Gonzalez was living. They found him in a state of disarray, surrounded by laptops, cash, and drugs. The digital ghost had finally been cornered in the physical world. The subsequent raids on his properties and those of his parents uncovered the tangible fruits of his crimes. They seized $1.6 million in cash, including $1.1 million that he had sealed in plastic bags and buried in a 3-foot drum in his parents' backyard. They found his laptops, multiple hard drives, and the compact Glock pistol he kept for protection. The kingpin of the world's largest cybercriminal enterprise had been dethroned. The game was over. The prosecution of Albert Gonzalez was a landmark event. He faced charges in 3 different federal districts: New York for the Dave & Buster's hack, Massachusetts for the TJX breach, and New Jersey for the colossal Heartland heist. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His own chat logs, meticulously detailed, became a diary of his crimes. Facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison if he went to trial, Gonzalez pleaded guilty to all charges. On March 25, 2010, he stood before a federal judge in Boston to receive his sentence. His lawyers argued for leniency, citing a possible diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome and an addiction to the thrill of hacking, which they compared to a drug. In a letter to the judge, Gonzalez himself wrote, "I am guilty of indulging my intellectual curiosity and obsession. I did it for the thrill." The prosecutors painted a very different picture. Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Heyman told the court, "This is a crime of economic terrorism. The scope of the conspiracy has no parallel." They described a cold, calculating criminal mastermind motivated not by curiosity, but by pure greed. They detailed the immense damage he had caused. The breached companies had spent hundreds of millions of dollars on remediation, legal fees, and fines. Banks had lost millions more, covering fraudulent charges, and millions of ordinary consumers were left vulnerable to identity theft for years to come. The judge sided with the prosecution. Albert Gonzalez was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison to be served concurrently with another 20-year sentence from the New Jersey case. It was the longest sentence ever handed down for computer crimes in American history. His co-conspirators also received significant prison time. The era of Operation Get Rich or Die Tryin' was officially over. The legacy of Albert Gonzalez is complex and profound. For corporate America, his case was a brutal wake-up call. It exposed the shocking fragility of the nation's financial infrastructure and forced companies to fundamentally rethink their approach to cybersecurity. The era of treating data security as a secondary IT issue was over. The Gonzalez case ushered in the age of the Chief Information Security Officer, multi-million-dollar security budgets, and the now commonplace reality of data breach notifications. For law enforcement, it was a lesson in the changing face of organized crime. As U.S. Secret Service Director Mark Sullivan stated after the sentencing, this case demonstrates that even in the cyber world, there is no such thing as anonymity. The investigation showcased the need for international cooperation and sophisticated digital forensics to combat borderless criminal networks. And what of Gonzalez himself? Was he a troubled genius, a digital addict driven by compulsion, or simply a brilliant thief? The truth is, likely a combination of all three. He possessed a rare talent, a deep understanding of complex systems that few could match, but he coupled that genius with a profound lack of empathy and a boundless appetite for risk and reward. He was a pioneer, but of a dark and destructive frontier. After serving a portion of his sentence, Albert Gonzalez was quietly released from prison. The man who stole 200 million credit cards and held the financial world in his grasp re-entered a world irrevocably shaped by his crimes. A world far more guarded, more suspicious, and more aware of the ghosts that live in the machine. His story serves as the ultimate cautionary tale of the digital age, that in a world built on ones and zeros, the potential for creation and the potential for destruction are two sides of the same coin.